my father only looked at me when he had something to correct. Not a greeting, not a question about my day, just a scan, top to bottom, like he was checking a list and marking everything wrong. I learned early that the safest thing I could do in that house was disappear into the background, so that's what I did. My name is Daniel. I'm the second son in a family where being second meant being invisible. My brother Marcus was everything my parents had planned for. Older by 4 years, louder by a mile. He graduated from Vanderbilt with a business degree, landed a consulting job in Nashville before the ink on his diploma was dry, and wore the kind of collared shirts that made my father nod slowly at the dinner table, the way he only nodded when something confirmed what he already believed about the world. Marcus was proof that the family had done something right. I was the footnote. I didn't go to a school my parents could brag about. I went to a state university 2 hours from home, studied information systems, and spent most of my nights in the campus lab, not because I had to, but because I wanted to. I liked the quiet. I liked the way a problem would sit there, heavy and unmovable, and then suddenly, at 2 a.m. with bad coffee going cold beside me, it would crack open and I could see straight through to the other side. I graduated without ceremony. My parents came. My father shook my hand at the parking lot. My mother took one photo. Marcus sent a text that said, "Congrats, man," with no punctuation. I moved to Columbus. I got a job doing IT support for a mid-sized logistics company. To my family, that translated to, Daniel fixes computers. And they weren't entirely wrong, at first. What they didn't know, what I never explained because no one ever asked, was what I was doing after 6 o'clock every night in my apartment on Broadview Road. I had noticed something years earlier when I was helping my grandmother figure out how to video call my aunt in Phoenix. My grandmother was sharp. She'd run a daycare for 30 years, managed a household of 6, kept books from my grandfather's small hardware store until he passed. But the moment I put a tablet in her hands, something shifted behind her eyes. Not confusion exactly, more like a kind of grief, like she was looking at a door she didn't have the key for and had already decided she never would. I thought about that a lot. The summer after I moved to Columbus, I started volunteering at a community center on the east side. They had a program on paper, digital literacy for adults over 60, but in practice it was one printed handout from 2019 and a laptop with a broken charger. I started showing up on Tuesday evenings, then Thursdays. Then I was building a curriculum from scratch, writing plain language guides, creating short videos explaining how to recognize a phishing email or how to set up automatic prescription refills online. I wasn't paid. I had a full-time job. I ate a lot of lunches at my desk and slept less than I should have, but something about those Tuesday nights felt more real than anything else in my life at the time. Within a year, 3 other community centers had reached out asking if they could use our materials. I said yes to all of them. Then a library director in Dayton called, then a senior services nonprofit in Cincinnati. I started building a simple platform, nothing fancy, just a clean interface with video modules, printable guides, a helpline volunteers could staff, and I called it BridgeWell. I want to be careful here about how I describe what happened next, because it didn't happen fast, and it didn't feel like success while it was happening. It felt like a second job that was slowly becoming a first job. It felt like weekends disappearing. It felt like choosing over and over between sleep and the next version of something I believed in. By the time I was 29, BridgeWell was operating in 11 counties across Ohio. We had a small staff, 4 full-time, a dozen part-time, a volunteer network that had grown to over 200 people. We had grant funding from 2 state agencies and a partnership with the Ohio Department of Aging. I had taken on the title of executive director, though mostly I thought of myself as the person who sent too many emails and never had a working printer. I did not tell my family any of this. That sounds stranger than it was. It wasn't a secret I was keeping out of spite or strategy. It was more that I had simply stopped expecting them to ask. My father's calls, the few he made, were mostly updates on Marcus. Marcus had been promoted. Marcus had bought a house in Franklin. Marcus was dating someone serious, a woman named Claire who worked in healthcare administration. I would say that's great and mean it, and then the call would end and I would go back to whatever I was working on. My mother called more often, but in a different way. Her calls were weather reports of family sentiment. Your father is proud of Marcus. Your aunt thinks you should move back closer to home. Grandma Rose asks about you. I would listen, and I would say the right things, and I would hang up and sit with the particular quiet of a person who has learned not to need what they're not going to get. I'm not telling you this so you'll feel sorry for me. I'm telling you this so you'll understand what I walked into the Saturday of Marcus's engagement party. He had proposed to Claire in April on a rooftop in Nashville. My mother had sent me the photos before Marcus did. The party was in June at my parents' house in Brentwood, Tennessee. I drove down on a Friday night, got a hotel room so I wouldn't have to navigate the morning chaos at the house, and showed up at noon in a blue button-down and khakis that my mother would at least consider acceptable. The backyard had been decorated. String lights, round tables with white linens, a catered spread from a place Marcus had apparently chosen personally. There were maybe 40 people. Cousins I hadn't seen since Christmas, my parents' friends from church, some of Marcus's colleagues from the consulting firm. I found a spot near the drink table, poured myself a sparkling water, and began the familiar work of being present without drawing attention. My father was in his element. I watched him move between clusters of guests, hand extended, laugh, perfectly calibrated, the version of himself he reserved for occasions that reflected well on him. He stopped by me once, early, clapped a hand on my shoulder and said, "Glad you made it," in the tone of someone checking a box. Then he was gone. My mother hugged me for a long time, which meant she felt guilty about something. I didn't ask what. Marcus found me about an hour in. He looked good. He always looked good. He'd gotten a haircut for the occasion, wore a linen blazer, had the easy confidence of a man who has never had to wonder if he belongs in a room. Daniel. He grabbed my arm. "Good, you're here." "Congratulations," I said, and I meant it. "Claire wants to meet you. I've told her about you." He paused, and in the pause was something I recognized as an attempt to remember what, specifically, he'd told her. Come on. Claire was exactly who I had expected her to be from the photos, put together, warm in a practiced way, the kind of person who makes you feel noticed because she was trained to. She worked in hospital administration. She shook my hand firmly. "Daniel," she said, "I've been looking forward to this." "Same," I said. "Congratulations to you both." "What do you do?" she asked. It was the natural question, the polite question. I had answered it 100 times at family events by giving the version that required the least explanation. I work in tech, nonprofit sector. That was usually enough to satisfy and redirect. But before I could answer, my Uncle Dale materialized at my elbow, already mid-sentence about Marcus's new house, and the moment dissolved. Claire smiled at me and turned toward Dale, and I drifted back toward the edges. This was the rhythm of the afternoon. My father toasted Marcus's career, his character, his future. A family friend named Robert gave a long speech about the importance of finding a good partner, which was really a speech about Marcus, with Claire as supporting evidence. My mother cried at the appropriate moments. Marcus was gracious and funny and exactly what everyone in that backyard had decided he was going to be from the beginning. I ate a plate of food and watched it all, and felt the specific tiredness of a person who has been invisible for so long that invisibility has stopped feeling like a wound and started feeling like just the weather. At some point, I ended up near the back fence with a glass of iced tea, half listening to a cousin complain about his mortgage. I was thinking about an email I needed to send Monday morning about a new county partnership we were close to finalizing when I heard my name, Daniel. It was Claire. She had separated from a group near the gazebo and was walking toward me with purpose, not the social drift of someone making rounds. She had a look on her face I didn't recognize at first. "I'm sorry we got interrupted earlier," she said. "I wanted to ask, you work in the nonprofit space?" "Yes," I said. "Digital access, mostly older adults." She tilted her head. "What organization?" "BridgeWell," I said. "Ridge." "Well," I said, "we're based in Columbus." She stopped. I watched her stop. It was a specific kind of stopping, not the polite pause of someone processing small talk, but the full-body stillness of someone recalibrating. "BridgeWell," she said again. "In Ohio." "Yes." "The digital literacy platform." She wasn't asking anymore. "The one with the partnerships through the Ohio Department of Aging. The one that did the pilot program with Columbus Area Hospital Networks last fall." I looked at her. "You know it." "I know it," she said, and her voice had changed. "We implemented your curriculum at 3 of our facilities. Our patient liaison team has been using your platform for 8 months. Our director showed it to us in a staff meeting last October and said it was the most practical resource she'd seen come out of the nonprofit sector in years." She paused. "You're BridgeWell." "I founded it," I said. We have a staff now. I don't want to overstate my role. You're the executive director." She shook her head slowly. "Marcus told me you worked in tech support. I didn't say anything to that." She turned and looked back toward the center of the yard, where Marcus was laughing at something my father had said, where my father had his arm around my brother's shoulder, the way he had since Marcus was old enough to stand beside him. "Does your family know?" she asked. She turned back to me. "What you've built? It's never really come up," I said. She looked at me for a long moment. The string lights had come on in the early evening shade, and the yard had softened into something almost pretty. "It should come up," she said quietly. "What you've done matters. What you've built matters to real people." She paused. "I've seen it." I thanked her. I meant that too. She went back to her party. I stayed by the fence a little longer, finishing my tea, listening to the cousin finish his mortgage story. Later, when I was saying my goodbyes, my father shook my hand again. Same grip. Same calibrated warmth. "Good to see you," he said. "Safe drive back." "Thanks," I said. My mother hugged me at the door. "Call more," she said. "I will," I said. I drove back to my hotel through the Tennessee evening, windows down, radio low. I thought about what Claire had said. I thought about the 8 months her team had been using something I built at 2 in the morning in an apartment in Columbus, something that had grown slowly and without announcement out of a Tuesday night at a community center, and a memory of my grandmother's face in front of a tablet she didn't know how to use. I didn't feel angry. I want to be precise about that. I didn't feel the thing you might expect after an afternoon of being overlooked in a backyard full of people who were supposed to know you. What I felt was quieter than that, and harder to name. It was something like understanding, finally, that the people who shaped you into the person you became are not always the people who will see who you became. That recognition and love don't always come from the same direction, that sometimes the most important witness to your life is a stranger at a party who uses your work on a Thursday afternoon without knowing your last name. I pulled into the hotel parking lot and sat in the car for a minute. I thought about the woman in Columbus, 73 years old, who had called the BridgeWell helpline 6 months earlier because she couldn't figure out how to video call her daughter in Seattle. One of our volunteers had walked her through it. She called back the next week to tell us it had worked, that she'd seen her grandchildren on a screen for the first time, that she'd cried and they'd cried, and could she have the number for the volunteer again to say thank you? I thought about the county director in Muskingum, who told me at a conference in March that our platform had been cited in a state legislative report on aging services infrastructure. I had gone back to my hotel room that evening and sat on the edge of the bed and said to no one in particular, I thought about the 41 people on my staff and volunteer roster who showed up week after week because they believed something I had believed first. And I thought about my grandmother and the tablet and the grief behind her eyes that I had decided years ago not to accept as inevitable. I got out of the car. The night was warm. Somewhere across the parking lot, a family was unloading luggage from a minivan, 2 kids running ahead, a father calling after them to slow down. I went inside, ordered room service, and opened my laptop. There was an email from the new county coordinator in Knox with a question about the onboarding process for their volunteers. I wrote back a detailed answer. I suggested a call for Tuesday. I told her we were glad to have them. I closed the laptop and sat in the quiet of the hotel room for a while. I was not waiting for my family to look up and see me. I'd stopped waiting for that a long time ago, and the stopping had felt like loss at first, and then like something more useful than loss. What I was doing, I had come to understand, was not about being seen by the people who had decided early what I was worth. It was about showing up again and again in rooms where the work mattered. It was about the woman in Columbus and her daughter in Seattle. It was about the volunteer in Dayton who had emailed me on a Sunday night to say she had finally figured out the updated module flow and felt so proud of herself she'd called her husband in from the other room to show him. It was about building something that would keep running on a Tuesday night even when I wasn't in the room. My father would probably never fully understand what BridgeWell was. My brother would probably keep telling people I worked in tech support, not out of malice, but because that was the last update he'd saved. And somewhere in a healthcare network across Tennessee and Kentucky, Claire was going to go back to work on Monday and sit in a staff meeting and look at a platform on her screen and know that the man who built it had spent a Saturday afternoon standing alone by a back fence, finishing a glass of iced tea, waiting for nothing. I think about that sometimes, and it doesn't make me sad the way it used to. If anything, it makes me careful. Careful about the people I look at when I walk into a room. Careful about who I ask questions of. Careful about who I assume is the footnote and who is the whole story. Because sometimes the person everyone has quietly agreed to overlook is the one who has been building something quietly. In the early mornings and the late nights, and the spaces between what other people think they know about you. And sometimes that building is the most important work in the room, even if no one in that room knows your name.